Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Good to have you all here. So we're gonna dive right in. I'm so happy to be hosting this session. So we have a very special guest today, Mai-kee Tsang. Hello, how you doing over there?
Do nothing, Dad. Do nothing.
So I connected with Mai-kee through Will. Carlos, who led a session the other day, bravely. I was too sick to show up. And we were speaking about, I don't even remember exactly how it happened, but podcast. Anyways, he recommended that I get in touch with Mai-kee about this. And she and I have a very good, robust conversation about things. And so this podcasting thing, it's getting to be a thing. It's getting to be big. It's getting to be one of those places that people can be discovered and get the word out and lay down a trail of breadcrumbs back to their own door. And there are probably lots of ideas about how to do it, how to approach these people, but there's always the awkwardness when we want to reach out to somebody. There's all this stuff that comes up. Who am I to have anything to say, and how do I even approach them, and what do I say? And in not knowing how to do it, a lot of people just don't do it at all, even though it could do wonders for their business, or they do it poorly, either from a place of collapse and it's just you wouldn't want to interview me, would you? No, just leave a bad review on my Facebook here. Or it's the overcompensating, posturing kind of email of this, I'm so great, wouldn't you be lucky to have me? And everything in between. So how to do this in a human way, how to reach out, connect with people who host podcasts, and get booked on them. So anyways, mostly I'm just going to turn it over here, but thank you all for coming. And Mike, thank you so much for taking time. I know it's later in the afternoon for you, and
it's all good. It's only 6 p.m.
But anyways, thank you for taking your time. I know it's precious. So yeah, I've asked her to share her thoughts on this. And then of course, some of you may be interested in working with her, and I wouldn't blame you. So I've asked her to share a bit about that at the end of what some of the options are, because this just isn't an area I specialize in. I speak broadly about hub marketing, and I'm full of opinions about that. But when it comes to the very specific terrain of podcast getting booked, it's not something I've done. I've interviewed 40, 50 times, somewhere in there. And they've just come to me. So I've never had to go out to them, which is a different arrangement. So anyways, I turn over to you again. Thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. And thank you to everyone who showed up live, and for everyone who's showing up as a recording, watching this as a recording as well. I welcome you too. So my name is Mai-kee Tsang, and I'm super, super excited to be joining you today to talk about how you can help to book yourself on a line podcast to grow your business. So with that said, I need to make sure to share my slides. So let me just share my screen. Oh, Tad, can you please enable screen sharing for me, please? Okay. I'm the co-host now. Awesome. All right, so I would love for everyone to be involved in this workshop, because I don't just want this whole time for me to be talking at you. I want to be talking with you. And so, because it's a relatively small number of us in the grand scheme. And so, we can unmute or like raise hands, all the things. Anyway, there'll be several prompts on these slides where I'll ask you to vote on a certain thing or to just share your opinion on something. So with all that said, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen? All right, perfect, thank you. All right, so let's get started. So here's what you can expect from our time together today, because I always want to set the expectations. So we're going to talk about how pitching podcasts can help you to build your authority and position yourself as an expert in 2021 and beyond. I share the whole and beyond part because honestly, everything I'm about to teach you is timeless skills. And that's the beauty of this. So no matter how much this industry will grow, because it's actually technically still in its embryonic stages, everything I'm going to share with you today, you really can't go wrong with it. And Will probably know what I'm talking about because he's actually worked with me before, which is awesome. I'm also going to be sharing with you the 3 stages of successful podcast guesting, because podcast guesting isn't just about writing the most perfect pitch. You need to know what to do before and after to really reap the rewards of this strategy. And I'm actually going to show you some real pitches that I've sent, both good and bad, because it's important for you to see kind of what a bad pitch looks like. And I threw myself under the bus for you for this workshop, so you can see how I started, because I did not start perfectly, far from it, but you need to see it basically. And of course, there'll be time for some Q&A. I'll make sure to stick around, like even if we move past the top of the hour, I'm happy to stick around to answer any questions. So, quick intro. Hi, again, I'm Mai-kee Tsang, and I'm the Sustainable Visibility Mentor and Podcast Guesting Strategist. I'm an accidental podcast guesting strategist. I'll get into that. So I help underestimated and underrepresented business owners to be consensually seen so they can grow their impact-fueled businesses for the long haul. My specialty when it comes to visibility is podcast guesting, and my mentorship is just for kind of like the trauma-sensitive approach as to why people don't show up. That can come along in the questions at the end for Q&A, but ultimately today is all about podcast guesting. Of course, I was not this super visibility podcast guesting strategist, forever. No. 2 years ago, my business looked very different. And the reason why is because I relied so much on referrals that I didn't do any other marketing, right? They just came to me and I got complacent and lazy, if I'm honest. I got lazy and it really bit me in the butt because suddenly nowhere to be seen at one point. And that's when I started to have a mini panic. So I went to 4 of my mentors at the time and I asked them for their advice. What should I do? And they said, you should start guesting on podcasts. That was it. Like, they honestly didn't give me any more guidance beyond that. And the thing is, for me, when I don't know how to do something, I will find a way. And I thrive very well under challenges. So I challenged myself to reach out and send 101 personalized pitches in 30 days in the summer of 2019. And just a quick caveat, I do not recommend you do that, okay? Because the thing is, I think the reason why I chose such a high number is because I was expecting a very low number of yeses, but that's not what happened. I actually received a yes, 1 of every 3 pitches I sent. That's a 33% booking rate, and industry standard is around 2%. So I knew I was onto something. It allowed me the opportunity to guest on over 50 podcasts, like as of today. And I realized that I actually looked at my name on Google. I went on an incognito window, so there's like no prior history, right? And then I realized that all of these interviews take me back 8 pages on Google. So if you look at my name, like I'm pretty much the only person who comes up as Mai-kee Tsang, and then there's all of these interviews that pop up time and time again. So if someone looks me up on Google, they know that I've got something to say. And so this one feature, it lives on. And that's the beauty of the strategy. That's why you don't need to chase 100 pitches every month. It's because they live on for you and they're like promoting you on evergreen, essentially, which is an amazing thing. And what this meant for my business. So if you're thinking, okay, this podcast guesting thing sounds interesting, but what does it actually look like? I shall tell you. So I had dream clients booking my services without doubting the value I can deliver in my offers and not doubting the pricing I set it at. When I started off as an entrepreneur, I almost I bargained myself. Like if someone seemed like, I know someone could do cheaper, but I can do cheaper too, right? Like, how does this sound for you? So I kept devaluing myself. over and over and over again because I didn't have any leverage at the time. I didn't have any authority at the time. But if someone Googles me and they want to hire me when it comes to podcast guesting, they'll be like, okay, it's been 8 pages now. I think she has something to say. And so they do. Right? And so imagine that you're offering something that you're really passionate about. You love offering in your business, whether it's a product or a service or a combination of the two. And when you drop the price, everyone's like, yeah, sure, here's my credit card. It's because they see you as someone who can help them. So that's what started happening. And in my business, I have various applications in place. If someone wants to work with me, I ask them this question: how much are you open to financially investing in me? And this person, who I've blurred out the name, obviously for privacy purposes, she was already ready to drop 3K to work with me. We had no prior contact, no email, no exchange on Instagram or anywhere. We had not talked before, but she simply heard me on a podcast. If that doesn't show you the possibilities, I don't know what will. But it was interesting that sometimes there may be some podcasts that you get onto and you never see a direct return. This is a very direct return, but some of them can happen a bit more subtly and a bit more slowly in the background. Someone can just simply be joining your email list, and then 6 months later, then they're ready to buy your $27 offer or something. But the beauty of this is that you get to reach people at all stages, because when they've listened to you, if they're just at that point in the business when they're just simply ready, then they might just invest in you, which is pretty awesome. I also get consistent influxes of engaged subscribers to my email list. And I want to emphasize engaged, because if someone has listened to you for like 45, 60 minutes and beyond, and they still want to hear from you, they're very much more likely to be engaged subscribers. The people who respond to your emails are very much more likely to buy your product or service. Also, being invited to teach inside paid courses, membership sites, masterminds, summits, events, etc. Hello, cough, cough right now. I mean, this is pretty awesome, because you get to reach new audiences and because you've built trust with the host. And so when you're thinking about guesting on podcasts, I don't just want you to think about how many people you're reaching through the audience. Don't ignore the host. Because sometimes I've had the host directly hire me because they're like, okay, after everything you just said, like, can we jump on another call? And because I want to hire you for this thing. So I want you to really treat the host as a part of the process, as, you know, they're involved in who you're serving. Don't see through them. See them. So this is how you could possibly grow your business. Like, these are just what's happened to me. So I wonder what this could mean for you. So now that you've seen some real possibilities of what podcast guesting can do, I'd love for you to share with me in the chat, which areas would you like to grow the most? Would you like to attract more clients? Would you like to grow your email list more? Would you like to build deeper relationships with people in business? Let me know in the chat. You can write ABC, like add in all of them, or if there is a particular focus. So I'm going to check the chat in just a second after I take a sip of water. And Tad, feel free to join in as well.
Thank you very much. This is very eye-opening. That idea of right, the host might actually become a potential client.
Mm-hmm.
But, of course, yeah, that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, so building deeper business relationships sounds like it's up your alley.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, there's a lot of ABC.
Yes, lots of ABCs. All of them. Yes. And Nadine says to sell my book, and Kalita, if I'm saying your name correctly, ABC, Susan ABC, all of them. Maria, Nadine, thank you for sharing. See, the beauty of this is that you can actually do all of it at once, which is the beauty of it. If you focus your thoughts on a particular goal, then that will be connected to your lead magnet that you offer at the end of an interview. But we'll get into that in a minute. Okay, so thank you for sharing in the chat with me. I love it. I love the enthusiasm. It's like, all of it, like, please, like, this sounds really, really good. All right, so I will emphasize once again that podcast guesting really isn't just about the pitching. Please do not think it's all about that. And I'm really emphasizing this because I have seen people only focused on pitching and it comes across as extremely transactional. And that really defeats the purpose of podcast guesting and the power of it. There's a 3-phase process that yeah, you need to follow this, okay? Like, it's because you showed up, you need to follow this, please. This is only going to help you, okay? So this is my personal framework. It's called Pitch with Purpose for obvious reasons, doing everything purposefully. So we're starting off with phase number 1, which is purposeful strategy. The reason why I don't start off with pitching straight away is because if someone pitches and then they get the opportunity, and then suddenly they're being put in front of hundreds, thousands, millions of people, but they haven't set up their business to fully receive the volume, it's almost for naught. Which is why phase 1, you need to develop a strategy for yourself. So what does this look like? Think of the eventual offer you'd like people to buy. Okay? Where do you want to lead listeners to? So for me, if I'm talking about podcast guesting, my eventual offer is the Ultimate Podcast Guesting Workshop Series, which is my step-by-step 3-part workshop, which follows this framework where I'll teach you the exact skills and strategies to book yourself on podcasts. It's actually what I'm going to be sharing at the end as well. So I know exactly that that is my offer. So in order for that to happen, what is the free thing that I need to offer at the end of interviews? So I need to offer a relatable lead magnet that's connected to that offer, right? So my lead magnet right now is called Be Our Podcast Guest, and that's where I interview 24 podcasters and myself to share their out-of-the-box advice for people who want to pitch themselves on podcasts. So they've given their out-of-the-box advice. I popped it all into a PDF. It is a downloadable resource, right? So I know that that lead magnet is eventually going to lead to, that workshop series as my offer. So through the emails, they're on my email list now. So they would have been able to kind of like see the various promotions that happen from time to time. And then they know, okay, that's the thing. So I got my offer, I've got my freebie. And in order for that freebie to be a downloadable, I need to say to the host why it's important for the audience to download it. So it's normally a natural next step to what you've talked about in the interview, and or it's a recap of what you said in the interview. Because there are some concepts that you may talk about that are pretty difficult to grasp just from an audio standpoint. Sometimes people need a visual, sometimes they just need things to be repeated time and time and time again in order for them to really grasp it. So your lead magnet needs to be somewhere where the host is going to want to guide their audience to after your conversation. In order for that to happen, you need to think about the topic that you talk about in the interview. So can you see how this all connects, right? The topic needs to be related to kind of like what you're valuing. Like, what do you value in your business? Why is it so important for you to talk about this topic? Because you're not going to want to talk about topics that aren't meaningful for you either. So you need to reverse engineer from your offer. That is how you create a purposeful strategy. Phase number 2, personalized pitching. It's exactly how it sounds. Sending personalized pitches, not copy and pasting and just swapping out the names, because guess what? Podcasters know. They know from the lack of personalization, because personalization doesn't just mean the name or the name of their podcast. They can tell from the details. And there's something that my friend Mai-kee shared with me, is something called nesting, where when you copy and paste, it actually shows because the color is slightly off. It's normally a dark purple or a dark green, or like an off shade of gray. When we see that and we see the color of the other text of like their name and the name of their podcast, when we see that, we're like, oh yes, definitely copy and paste. It literally looks like plug and play. It's a thing called nesting, and you really can't get rid of it because Google knows when something's copied, basically. So type it out. like individually per person, right? So just start from there. So with the personalized pitching, it's really that simple. It's just, okay, just personalize it. Why this person? Because when you're reaching out to podcasters, it's not their job to meet you where you're at. It's your job to meet them where they're at. Because one of my mentors who runs quite a top ranking podcast actually in the marketing world, he said to me, not me personally as if it was an attack, but he said just out of frustration one day, he was like, do you know, podcasters, they didn't start it to make other people famous. And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. Which is why when we're pitching, we can't come across as if they are so blessed to have us on there. It's more like, hey, you're doing an amazing thing. I have something that I really think can help your audience and you. Do you think this could be helpful? So we shift that positioning and we come from a place of service. And then when you do, I promise you, you will get more yeses, okay? Because you wouldn't believe how many pitches get sent and they immediately get cast off the table because it's like, okay, I want nothing to do with this person because it's not personalized. But when you personalize it with such intentionality, you're much more likely to get yeses, even if it's a not yet. Because not yet means that the door's closed, but the window's open. We'll go more into pitches anyway in just a bit. But first, let me share with you phase 3. So once you've sent that yes-worthy personalized pitch, then it's time for the pre-interview prep and post-interview promotion. So there is this lull period between when you get a yes for the pitch to when you're doing the interview. And there's also another lull time between when you do your interview and when it airs. So quite a long lead time, basically. So during that time, what do you do? So the pre-interview prep. Make sure that when you show up, you reflect exactly what you've said you would do in your pitch. I say that because there was a time when I didn't. I thought I went on a podcast for a different topic, but then it was actually a different one. Luckily, I knew what my topic was about anyway, like at the back of my hand, but it did not feel good to feel like, oh crap, like I actually came to talk about something completely different, but okay. Okay. So please do prepare yourself. And I mean that from a logistical standpoint and also from a psychological standpoint. So logistics, listen to the podcast. Please listen to, I'd recommend at least 2 episodes from the podcast you're about to be featured on. Listen to ones where they have guests, because when you do, you start to notice patterns of their interview style. You will learn whether the host interjects their guest, or do they sit back and hold space? Because ultimately, interviewing is a conversation. And it feels very hard on the ears when you can tell that 2 people are almost like competing for whose voice is going to be heard. You want it to be like a seamless dance that you do together. And you can best prepare for that by listening. And also, when you're able to pick out relevant references during the interview, not only does it tell the host that you've listened, but it also helps the audience potentially do a bit of binge listening. And so that only helps the host more. It makes them look even better than they already do. So listen, look at the pitch you've sent so you know exactly what you're going to be talking about. Do their process, because they often have forms that you need to fill out, which is like a simple thing like your bio, your headshot, maybe some questions that they should ask you, the links to your lead magnet, your website, etc., etc. So have that all together on like an internal one sheet. Side note, I personally don't like one sheets. Some people do it, but the only reason why I don't like it is because it feels less curated. It's okay to have one for yourself so that, you know, you can always like reference and just copy and paste like from your one sheet into their forms. But sending one, it's almost just like, oh, yep, I've got this all done. You take your pick. You know, I'm that good. I've got my own one sheet. That's how it comes across to me personally. And I'm a highly sensitive person. So this really kind of rubs me the wrong way because it's almost like an assumption that, oh yeah, you're going to take me on. Here are my topics, take your pick. That's the side note. Of course, try what you want to try. So that's how you can prepare yourself for the interview. And then when you've done the interview, please do not ghost the host. And what I mean by that is don't just do the interview and suddenly be nowhere to be seen when it's time to promote it. Because hosts talk. Podcasters know other podcasters. It's like an underground network that we have. And we share information around certain guests. And that can be a good or a bad thing. If you're that guest who shows up not just on the day that it goes live, but long after or even beforehand, you're golden. Because don't forget that you can be re-invited back onto a podcast. That's why it's okay to not send 100 pitches every single month, because you don't need to. And do you actually have the capacity to do that many interviews and do the promotion? Do it justice. Because that will give a sign to the host that you're worth trusting. And that's something that we get to earn. It's a privilege for us. So let's not kind of like tarnish that opportunity. So can you see now, it's not just about pitching, it's everything before and after. Because stage 3 is how you can really, really, really extend and nurture the relationship moving forward for more opportunities in your business that you otherwise wouldn't have access to had you not had their trust. So these are the 3 phases of pitching with purpose that I highly recommend that you look into. And now let's go back into personalized pitching. I really wanted to give you some real examples, and so I shall not disappoint. So before we get into the pitches, there's one quick mindset shift. I've already mentioned it, but it bears repeating. I always emphasize service over self-importance. Because again, it's not just about building your authority. It's about building a connection. It's about building a relationship. And I promise you, if it's the other way around, where it's self-importance before service, sometimes they won't get to know your service because the self-importance already puts them off. And then the door and the window will be closed. Because the beauty of a not yet is that there could be a yes later on. But if we treat people almost like tissues, like they can be used and thrown away, then that's what's going to create this kind of like endless search, this endless chase for more pitches, more interviews, because each of these bridges you've started to burn because there has been like very little service, but so much self-importance. So I please ask of you to always lead with service. It's okay to know that it's a business strategy. They know that. They know that it's a business opportunity, and that's fine, right? But don't lead with that. Lead with the service and the value. And you can keep the self-importance to yourself. It's fine to feel good about yourself when you're on a podcast that you're proud of, you know? That's fine. But there are some things you can keep to yourself. Okay? All right, so actual pitches. Give me some thumbs up if you want to see some actual pitches I've sent. Awesome, thank you. All right, so here is my first pitch. So actually, I shouldn't blur out the name because I've actually revealed the identity of who this person is, and I shall share it. Okay, so his name is Bobby Klink, right? So we've actually reconciled over this, and I'll tell that story in just a bit. But anyway, here's what I sent to him, and you can tell this is on Facebook Messenger. It's not that you can't pitch via DM, just don't pitch like this, okay? So, hi Bobby, are you currently taking guests for your podcast? I'm a launch strategist and conversion copywriter. And I'd love to be able to share my insights on how to build your authority as a small business owner, especially during times of launching. I'm currently conducting a challenge of also pitching 101 podcasts as well. And I'm happy to break that process down for you if you feel it could be beneficial for your audience. If this resonates with you at all, I'd love to hear from you. If not, no worries, and wishing you all the success and can't wait to see what you do with your 100th episode in the next few months. All the best, Mai-kee. Tsang. Okay. Why do you think this didn't work? Before I show you the actual rejection message, why do you think this didn't work? You have a couple of minutes to grill me, and then because I'm a highly sensitive person, I will put a stop on the grilling because I'm a sensitive person. But until then, I just want you to really look at this pitch and be brutal. Like, let me know in the chat box, why do you think this didn't work? Can take a sip of water and take a look. All right, so Kalita says you didn't reflect anything about him and his work and what you appreciate about him. Yep, absolutely. Anything else? You know, yes, Kerry didn't want to be one of 101. He wants to be number one. Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Kim says largely about you pitching, teaching others what you'll do rather than what you can offer his audience. Sunday says nothing about how you're saying this would fit his audience, all about you, what you want, says Maria. Okay. Yeah, you're all right. All completely correct. And you will see through his message. But I just want you to take a note of what you've said. See what your other members have said as well. Because what feels wrong for you is a clue as to what will be right for you. Okay, lots of I statements. Yes, exactly, Susan. Okay, I'm going to put a stop on the grilling now. But thank you, though, for your honesty. I appreciate it. And you can judge in your mind. No worries. Just not to me, because I already know that I did something really wrong. Okay. All right. All jokes aside, here's what he said. Hey, Mai-kee, hope you're doing well. I'm really focused on some specific topics at the moment, and conversion copy isn't one of them. I'll keep you in mind for the future. He didn't. But anyway, but a piece of unsolicited advice telling me that you're pitching to 101 podcast is a bit of a turnoff. It tells me you're looking for quantity, not really good fit. Podcast hosts generally want to feel special, like you're really focused on them. So if I were you, I wouldn't tell other hosts that you're pitching to 101 podcasts. Bobby. So I felt guilty about this for months. I literally remember when I said that I challenged myself. This is at the very beginning of the challenge. So first pitch, first rejection. I literally want to hide under a rock and just like not come out. My fellow mastermind buddies are like, oh no, you have to continue. And I'm like, I really don't want to, because I felt so bad for someone to say to me that they think I'm only looking for quantity. It was actually a real like jab to the heart, because that's the last thing I'd want anyone to ever feel when they talk with me. But it was a great lesson. And later on, a couple of months down the line, I actually reconciled with him because I ran into him at an event and I just profusely apologized. And he honestly, it's almost like he forgot about it because it wasn't a big deal to him. And that's the point, right? It was a big deal for me, but I apologized anyway because it was disrespectful in the grand scheme of things to a fellow business owner. And then he said, you know, it's fine. Like, you know, I already knew of you, so I'm sure you had good intentions. It just didn't come across the right way. And I said, yeah. And the thing is, his advice that he shared with me here is pretty much what's helped me to learn what podcasters really want. Because what I've learned, like this whole method, pitching with purpose, that I've shared with you, all of it was because I actually asked for podcasters what they wanted. And then I started validating this process again and again and again. It works when I do it for myself. It works when I teach others to do it for themselves. I've done it for other people. And now I'm running a certification program where I'm teaching VAs how to pitch on behalf of their clients. So it's like quadruple validated, essentially. And it's because of advice like this, which is why when you get rejections, because it is a part of the process, I invite you to, first of all, it's fine to have a pity party. I let myself have pity parties all the time. When I'm upset about something, I just take it offline, so it's private. So I'm not just like ranting on Facebook or anything, and people like looking at my posts. No, but instead, I let myself feel bad about it. You know, I let myself like feel sad or angry or anything because we are allowed to feel. But when that sting is taken out, look back on the feedback and see, okay, is there a pattern for what people are telling me? Are there things that I can actually change? Or am I getting no's because there are things outside of my control, like scheduling, someone's on a hiatus or something? So really look at that feedback because it can be extremely valuable, like how it has been for me. So now you've seen what a bad pitch looks like. Of course, I want to redeem myself and, you know, show you what a good pitch looks like as well. So here's what a successful one looks like. And I am a past copywriter, so we get this question a lot from clients around, is longer better or is shorter better? I personally don't care. It's just like, okay, this is just how it came to be. But I want you to focus on the elements of why each part was important. And I will go through it as I'm reading, okay? So here is one of my best pitches, and my pitch method is based off what you see here. So I'm going to read the pitch and then I'm going to go back and break it down. Okay, so subject line, podcast guest request for TCC. Let's get some copy moles over ground. Rat emoji. Pretend that's a mole. Hey, Rob and Kira. My name is Mai-kee Tsang. I'm a fellow podcaster, copywriter, copy mole in the underground, and a 2019 student in your think tank mastermind. So I'm hoping you know me a bit by now. I wanted to reach out to you both today to ask if you think your TCC audience would benefit from learning how to build their authority and increase their visibility by guesting on podcasts. After binge listening to the CCP podcast, when I first started my copy business in 2018 and meeting Rob IRL in London the following month, I know that you love interviewing fellow copywriters and experts in their processes, habits, successes, and failures for your audience to steal an idea or two from. And I believe I can really contribute to something to the conversation and have something still worthy for them to use in their own work. If this is piquing your interest in any way, here are some ideas we can cover. How to overcome the mindset blocks that will happen when you pitch the podcast, especially the bigger ones. The 8 elements of writing a value-rich and audience-serving pitch. What to actually do and say when it's interview day. And if you'd like to get the inside scoop of my one-on-one pitch challenge, there are no questions you can't ask. Quick side note. If you're thinking to yourself, Mai-kee, I thought you learned your lesson. Why are you talking about this challenge again? Did you not learn from Bobby? Okay. And what I will say to that is this. Rob and Kira were 2 of my 4 mentors that I mentioned at the beginning in my story. They are the ones who knew about this challenge, and I actually got this challenge idea from Kira because she did 30 pitches in 30 days and I just chose 101. So they were a part of the process with me. It was their mastermind that I went into when I was like, oh my God, I want to hide under a rock now. So that's why context is important here. It's not always going to be applicable to everyone, but to them, it was very relevant. Okay, so I'm going to go back. But of course, I'm totally open to your own things and angles to best suit your audience. And finally, whether or not I'm a good fit for your podcast, I truly wish you all the continued success for your show and will continue to be a super fan of TCC no matter what. All my best, Mai-kee. P.S. If you want to hear what my voice is like, pinky promise, I don't sound like nails on a chalkboard. Here's the link. And PPS, being a podcaster does have its perks. I've got all the equipment to ensure audio quality will be top notch. Hello, Blue Yeti, if we do decide to go ahead. So before I go back and break it down, I'd love for you to tell me now, why do you think this pitch worked? So tell me your first thoughts that come to mind in the chat, and I'll just take a look to see what everyone has to say. And yes, for those of you who have questions, please do let me know, like as we go to the end of the workshop, which is relatively soon. I want to make sure that this is going to be all applicable for you. So Kim says, so beautifully personalized. Thank you. Sunday says, you established a personal connection. And Susan said, it feels as though you love their podcast. Yeah. That's a good point. Yes. Tad, is there anything that you want to share at all? Let's get you involved.
Yeah, well, there's so much. The listing the possible topics is helpful. You know, if somebody comes to want to interview me, it's one thing, but if I'm coming to them, it's a big lift for them is say, hey, here I am. I do a bunch of stuff. Great. Now, what do you want to talk about? Like, wait, but you came to me.
Yeah.
You came to me. You should be the one. Whoever initiates it should probably be the one to have ideas. And I've had the reverse where people say, hey, I'd love to have you on my podcast. And so what should we talk about? And it's like, what?
Oh, gosh.
What? So yeah, if you're initiating, it's good to have some ideas. And if I get the sense, now I can just say when I've gotten emails from people, want to write a guest post or something, which is rare that I say yes. But yeah, you can tell immediately if they've really thought it through and if it's a fit. One commiseration story I wanted to share is some of you know who Van Jones is. He's a commentator in the news, and I knew him back in the day in the Bay Area. When I was first starting my business, I wanted a bunch of testimonials, and some of those testimonials are still on my website under the testimonial tab now. And so I got some people with bigger names who gave me a testimonial, and he was one of the people. He wasn't famous back then in the same way, but I reached out to him, and he sent me this message, and he said, look, nobody likes to be a cog in somebody else's promotional machine. And so for that reason, I'm not going to be giving a test. It's like, I love you, and just, I'm not going to give it. And it was, boy, that stung, and that really stuck with me forever. So anyways, just commiseration on that.
Oh, even if that didn't happen to me, I felt the sting. I think like I saw some other people's faces and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a toughie.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Dad. And yeah, you brought up a really good point around giving people like options, especially if you're the one initiating it, because our sole job here is inviting them to collaborate and making it as easy as possible for them to say yes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's yeah. Amen. No, I thought it was a very good email, and it's to see the personalization, even the subject line, the copy mole reference, which I know is some term that they use, and no, very good. Yeah, very good. Thanks for sharing it.
Thank you. So just looking at some other entries in the chat. So yes, Maria says focusing on their audience, and Dean said providing lots of open information, but left it up to them. Erica said you gave evidence of binge listening, very personal to their needs and interests, with the audience paired along with their importance, very friendly, not overbearing, but knowledgeable, and gave a link to who you are for your voice experience. Yes, Erica, like bonus points for you, brownie points. So let me just go back and just kind of like deconstruct it as we go. So yes, Ted, you are correct. With the copy moles reference, that's already an insider thing. Another insider thing is that I know that Kira likes rats. She has pet rats with her now 3 children. So I was like, oh, just pretend that's a mole right there, because there is no mole emoji. And it's also a very clear request. It says podcast guest request. No one is going to look at that and think, oh, I wonder what that is. No, they know what it is. It's clear. So make it clear. I don't do, we're taught as copywriters not to be all cutesy or clever, just be clear. We have room for cutesiness and cleverness later on, but never for this, but never for the sake of like not being clear though, right? So we are always, always, always clear. Tad, you've unmuted yourself. Is there something you want to say for that?
Just amen.
All right.
Having a clear subject line. Because the truth is, if they're looking for podcast guests, that's probably an email they'll open. If they're not looking for podcast guests, they won't. And so there's a natural filter. People think of the subject line in the email, or the same as the headline in a sales letter. They think the purpose of it is to get people to write or to read more, to get people to open the email. And I say, no, that's not the purpose. I say the purpose of it is actually to eliminate almost everybody except your ideal clients. The goal of a subject line is it gets the right person to open it. And so if somebody writes me and says, hey, are you accepting guest blog posts? I may not even respond. I may not even open it because it's like, no, I'm not. Or it's low priority. But if it's, hey, are you looking for help with this? Or, they name something specific. Hey, are you looking for good niche case studies? Well, as a matter of fact, I am. Hey, do you want a good example of point of view marketing? Oh, I totally am. Very likely I'm going to open it. So yeah, gosh, I cleared, because I remember I used to do fundraising, and not well. but I was living in California at the time. And somebody pointed out to me, it's like, Ted, you have this pattern where you're so good at building the relationships. You're so good at the small talk, and you never ask the people for money. I mean, they love you, they trust you, they felt this connection with you, but I wouldn't ask. And I started to realize this is a deep, there's respect to people. It's actually very respectful to, there's a fellow I know, Joel Solomon in Vancouver. He's got access to funds and he gives a lot to nonprofits and radical causes. And his the bane of his life is people's like, hey, Joel, we should go for coffee sometime. And he would way rather somebody just say, Joel, we got a project coming up. We need 10 grand. I think you're going to love it. Can you give me 5 minutes? Let me make my pitch. And he's just, great, go ahead. Right. And he's way happier with that because it's direct, it's candid, it's clear, rather than anyways.
Yeah, so be clear with your request. And in this case, the subject line does exactly that. And I had room to be a little bit cutesy because of the whole internal reference and even an emoji. Side note on that, there was a pitch I sent and she specifically opened it because her branding had red apples. So guess which emoji I used? A red apple. And she was like, I loved it. I opened it because of that. And then we got it. Anyway, so as we keep moving forward, so hey, Rob and Kira, so I'm addressing both hosts. When you are pitching to a podcast with multiple hosts, just acknowledge them all. You know, it helps because you never know who's actually going to be reading it. So acknowledge all the hosts if there are multiple hosts. So I immediately went in with who I am and how they will know me. Because yes, I am their student, but I'm one of many students. I'm not the only one that they have. They have plenty of people with their many multiple offers. So it's just like a quick kind of like recap. It's like, oh, hey, here's how you know me. But okay, I know that everyone you're about to pitch isn't going to be your friend or your mentor per se. So around this time, if you don't have that personal connection, this is when you drop the common ground. So the key word here is fellow. So I'm a fellow podcaster, I'm a fellow cat lover, I'm a fellow person who can eat spaghetti very neatly, whatever you want to put in there. And yes, I can actually, I'm one of those people. I can wear a white shirt and eat spaghetti bolognese, just saying. But the point is, here is where you can, thank you. Like, this is where you can either have a little fun, depending on what you know about the host, or if they are like super professional, then you want to know why you're worth knowing. So what puts you on common ground? Which viewpoints do you share? This is where you put, I'm a fellow X, right? Then I segue into my ask. So, hey, I'm reaching out to you to ask about this. I've given, like, look at how I formatted this pitch as well. It's not one big clump, because if you do one big clump, it's very overwhelming for the human eye. That's just how it is. So I'd say 3 to 4 lines and then just put a gap, right? Put a gap in the character. Put a gap between the paragraphs. Use emojis if you want. As you can see, I've italicized certain things. I've also emboldened certain words. So I've emboldened the main topic here, right? And then I've talked to them like, hey, I know your podcast. I do. And also just another shout out to Rob. Like, hey, he does know me. I can prove it. I met him, that sort of thing, you know? And this part here is very important. This wouldn't be obvious unless you listen to their podcast. So I basically reflected back the language that they use in their intro. So I've listened to their podcast naturally anyway, but this is what was in their intro before they rebranded. So they talked about, hey, we love interviewing fellow copywriters, stealing their processes and ideas, all that stuff. So I just reflected back their language. And as a past copywriter, this is what you do when you gather voice of customer research. You ask an interview, you survey your ideal customers, right? And then you get the sales copywriter to reflect that language back into the sales material, in the sales emails, in the sales page. And so I just basically taken that principle and I've just reflected back through a podcast pitch. And then I'm just like, hey, I know I've got something for you. And so I'm just emphasizing at this point, like, look, I know this is going to help your audience because I know them very well. I know because I've listened to you. I know what you look for in a guest. And then I made it easy for them. I gave them pretty much a buffet. I've given them the cuisine, i.e. the topic, but I've given them a buffet of options, right? So it's all interconnected. So they get to pick any of them if they want to, or they can see this under the same umbrella. But the point is, I've made it easy for them to say yes for things that I knew would be interesting to them. Because I know that their audience, they struggle a lot when it comes to mindset blocks, especially when it comes to putting themselves out there. I also know that they like knowing how things work. As copywriters, we follow so many formulas, so we like knowing the factors in each thing. And they also like juicy gossip. So that's why I was like inside scoop. So I knew that they'd like that. But despite me giving them their options, I still put it back in their court. I put the ball back in their court. And that is my form of respect, saying like, look, I know this is your platform. I'm just offering myself up to you at this point. So I said, hey, this is what I have. Let me know what you think though. And I also released any expectation that I will be a guest. And I honored that. I'm like, look, whether or not I'm a good fit, all the best to you anyway. Like, I will still support you regardless of this. And then, of course, I sign off. And then I've got 2 PSs which do different things. So the first PS is the fact that I think someone said it in the chat box, that I've given some evidence for how I already sound. Right? So I've got my own podcast. Sometimes I'll swap out that link with an interview I've done with someone I know they know. So they've got that connection there. And I will go that step further and put a timestamp. It's like, you don't have to listen to the whole hour thing. Look at 13 minutes 08. I know you're going to like that. It just helps. All right. And then the second PS section is I've overcome their objection for what they would have with any guest. Are they going to sound good? Got the equipment, all good. You can have fun here if you want to, or you can, keep it simple, be like, oh, here's my website, or here's a specific article that I've written about this. There is a fun thing that I definitely did, because there was a host who loved Disney films, and I said, hey, if we decide to chat, I'm happy to do my Lilo and Stitch impression for you, because I can do that. Right? And I actually heard back from the host gatekeeper at this point, because you won't always directly reach the host. You might actually reach their gatekeepers. They were quite honest. It was a bit brutal at first, but it worked out in my favor in the long run. They said, do you know, we normally don't accept guests who have as little as following as you. Oh God. But they said, but your pitch was that good. So I know that she's going to want to speak with you. Boom. So personality matters. Okay, especially when you pick up on those details. I picked up on that detail from looking at the about section in her website when I knew that she liked Disney films. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to play on that reference. Okay, so when you do your research, look at what they like. Look at what they share about, because if they put it online, then they care about it to a degree. So let's reflect back on what they already know, because we learn to trust people who feel like they get us, that we have something in common. Like if I meet fellow people who can wear white shirts and eat spaghetti cleanly, I'm like, yes, you come on to the podcast. No, not just that, but it helps. So yes. So Tad, I saw you unmute yourself. You have things to share.
Yeah, that last paragraph, that, hey, no worries if it's not a fit, to me, that's a standard in any reaching out to any hub. Is the biggest, people think that the biggest skill we need in selling is this overcome objections thing, but the biggest skill that we need is diffusing pressure. Mm-hmm. And there's just a built-in pressure in any kind of, if you approach somebody, there's a built-in pressure. And so it's so important to, number one, just know that it's there and to diffuse it. And so any kind of phraseology around, pressure, I know you must be so busy, you've got a lot on the go, no expectations, whether or not this is a fit, I hope, all of that, letting them know that you're not expecting it, because it's extremely distasteful when somebody approaches with the assumption that it's a fit, mm-hmm. With that kind of pressure, or without you gotta press the release valve on this, so that if people don't feel like they can say no, that no is going to be okay, it's very hard to give a full yes. And there's something about releasing that pressure at the end. You know, when I do my workshops, day-long workshops and weekend workshops, they're done on a pay-what-you-can basis. People attend, pay a small deposit, and whatever they want to pay, anything at the end. And the thing I realized very early on was, well, I'll give you two examples. One was at the very end. This was somebody else who did a pay-what-you-can workshop I was told about. And they said, we want everyone to just, sit and think about what's the amount that feels right for you to pay, under that amount. And then we're going to invite you to pay just a little bit more than that and stretch yourself. I just hate it because they just figured out what felt right. And now you're asking them to step over that. And so if anything, at the end, I realized, man, they've received a whole day or a whole weekend of content. So my job has to be now to release the pressure, because they're going to be feeling so much pressure to pay a certain amount not to offend me. And so I actually have to, if I want them to be generous, I actually have to take the pressure away. If I want it to be a real generosity and not something they will regret later. Because I could probably use some tactics and get them to pay more at the end, but that will have them feel awful afterwards. They'll feel tricked or, seduced or something.
Yeah,
dude. They'll feel like, oh man, I got worked. And Khalida and I have had a lot of conversations about this, where all these techniques are used, and in the moment, it seems to make sense. And afterwards, you look back and say, "Whoa, what happened to me?" So, anyways, all of that to say, there's a lot of pressure built into situations, and if we take the pressure away, whatever yeses there are will be real solid yeses. That we can rely on, and they'll feel better, of course, in the process. And I love this about here's what my voice sounds like. It's so kind, if you imagine this, imagine you're the podcast host and you have to do this awkward thing of, I need to hear your voice. I need to hear it. Like, this is a very awkward thing to ask. So preempting and say, hey, just, here's how it is. Here's how I sound. Here's my tech. I know this is probably an awkward thing for you to ask. So I'm not even going to make you have to ask it. There's a lot of compassion in this of meeting people where they're at. Not making them jump through the hoops. So anyways, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's so true. And thank you for sharing that, because I already knew that. I think because I'm also a podcaster myself, and I have had many pitches where it pisses me off when there is no compassion towards the end, and someone is very, very forward and say that, oh, and when you're ready to book me in, here's the link to my calendar. And I'm like, hold up, cowboy or cowgirl, cow person.
Yeah.
Like, no. Like, that's not a good thing. And so that's why I've added in this essential element. It releases expectation. It makes them feel good. And this is what allows for the potential not yet, and because we don't want obligated yes. We want a hell yes, and this is a sentence that will allow for that, basically. So with that said, you shared why the pitch words. Yes, you've already done that. All right. As I said, when you looked at the bad pitch that I shared with you, and you looked at the good pitch now, you picked out what you loved and what you really didn't like. And those are going to be clues as to what's going to work for you. So if I look back on the chat, let me give a shout out to a couple of people. So Maria says focusing on their audience. That means, Maria, that when you pitch, you're going to want to focus on their audience. Nadine said providing a lot of open information, but left up to them. That means that, Nadine, you're going to create the buffet. You're going to offer the cuisine, but offer the buffet, and then let them choose instead of you choosing for them and assuming that you know what they want. You're giving them options. You're making it easy for them to say yes because you've given them everything on a silver platter, essentially. Right? And then if I go further around, what you didn't like in the bad pitch, doesn't want to be a part of the one-on-one, be the number one, right? So make the host feel special with, when you're reaching out, like, hey, I admire your work. Here's why. Give specific details, because we know who's talking out of their ass when they are giving generic crap, okay? So please do give specific things. All right, so keep things simple. This is a lot that I've shared with you. Okay, so when you're thinking about pitches, I want you to think of what I like to call the PR method. And I want you to guess in the chat what that stands for. Will, if you're still here, you already know this answer. so please, like, let your fellow members, get a chance to pick. So, personal relationship. All right, thanks, Will. All right, personal relationship. That's a good guess. Anyone else who wants to guess along with Kalita? Thanks, Will. All the best to you. All right, so Kalita seems to be the main person who's guessing right now. So, in essence, PR, it does not stand for public relations as we know it to be. It's very simple. Personalization, relevancy. That is it. Personalization is the initial hook. No one wants to read an email that just says hi. So when I talk about personalization, I don't just mean the name, I don't just mean the podcast name, but I mean those specific details, things that people would only know if they actually listened to their podcast or knew what their work was. That initial hook is what's going to allow for them to stay and read more. So the relevancy part is the retention piece. You need both because you can have the most beautiful personalized email in the world, but if it's not relevant, it's going to be a no. If you have the most relevant thing, but it's not personalized, it's going to be a no. So you need both. So be sure to personalize and make sure it's relevant to every person you send a pitch to. So where do you go from here? Let's start to summarize our implementation steps, shall we? So determine your podcast guesting goals. We had a lot of ABCs at the beginning. So maybe pick a leading one and then have like a secondary one and a tertiary one. Because remember, you need to reverse engineer your offer. You need to think of, the offer you eventually want them to buy. You need the free lead magnet and you need the topics that you're going to be speaking about in alignment with your current values. So if your goal is to build your email list, for example, you're going to need a kick-ass lead magnet. If your goal is to mainly sign on new clients, make sure you have the bandwidth and you have the slots open on your calendar. So when they go to your website, they can actually book on. You don't want to kind of like put any roadblocks in between someone working with you, how you want them to work with you. So you need to make sure your system is set up in your business to fully receive. So again, reverse engineering the process. So eventual offer you want them to buy, what do they need from me in order to trust me, right? You got the lead magnet that you'll offer at the end of interviews that's going to be connected to that eventual offer. But in order for people to download this lead magnet, what do you need to talk about for that to be the natural next step? Write yourself some yes-worthy pitches by following the PR method, which stands for personalization and relevancy once again. And of course, most importantly, when you are sending anything or doing anything when it comes to not just podcast guesting, this applies to everything in business, please, please, please do serve. Choose service over self-importance any and every time. So as we wrap up for the Q&A, just want to say thank you so much for tuning into this workshop. And Tad, you've unmuted yourself. So something you want to share before I...
Yeah, well, maybe before we jump into the Q&A, would you be willing to share the stuff that you have on offer if people want to work with you? Because I imagine there's some people that are curious, either watching this live or on the recording, and this is something I think people need help with. So if you'd be willing to do that now, and then we'll do the Q&A after.
Thank you. That's really, really kind of you. It's actually what I was about to say next as well, which is like perfect timing. And I do want to say this as well. For every host that you are speaking with, do not assume that they allow you to sell. Do not assume that they'll allow the lead magnet even. Some, like very few, will not allow any share, which is interesting. So always ask consent. Before I jumped in to do this workshop with Tad, I asked him beforehand, I said, would you be open to me sharing an offer that could help your audience? It's all right if that doesn't align for you. But I wanted to ask. And I know this because I watched his videos that he sent over to me when we first connected. And he spoke about this event that he hosted, and one of the speakers put his business card on all of the chairs without Tad's consent. And when I already knew to ask anyway, but that just reaffirmed how important consent is for Tad. So when it comes to podcast host, or even anyone you collaborate with, never assume that you're allowed to do it, because it really puts a bad taste in their mouth. And I've had people sell without my consent, and I feel really crappy. I don't want to promote their episode after that. I'm like I would have been okay if you actually asked me, but you went and assumed, and that doesn't feel good. So ask hey, would you be open to me sharing a free gift? I also have this I normally pick a lower ticket offer compared to my one-on-one services, and I normally give them a ballpark range for that. I'm like, oh, I also have this too, but whichever feels comfortable for you, if any. And then they tell me it's normally just a lead magnet, which is fine, but the point is, it doesn't come as a surprise to them. I haven't just kind of blindsided them in the interview, and it makes them go because that's what happens to me. So thank you, Tad, for the permission. I really appreciate it. So everyone who's watching this either live with us right now, or you're watching this as a recording, if you would like to learn the exact skills and strategies to book yourself on a line podcast to grow your business. So if you think of the 3-phase framework, there is a workshop for each part of the framework, and you can actually get the whole holistic process for my own workshop series, which I call the Ultimate Podcast Guesting Workshop Series. And I was wondering whether that was okay for me to call it that, because yeah, I wondered it was a bit too much, but I luckily had some feedback from the students who went through it, and they said, no, it actually is ultimate. So I'm going to own it. Okay. So I do have the 3-part process, literally step by step for each part, so that you can really integrate this into your business. Because honestly, I podcast guested for the last 2 years now. It's something that I'm always going to do. I love the intimacy of it. I love the reach. I love the evergreen element of it. And if any of this has resonated with you today, I do invite you to just simply check it out. So I've also dropped the link in the chat box as well. I might need the HTTP part because it doesn't seem to be linking. That might work. But yeah, I'll also send that link to Tad as well, for any replays for this workshop as well. But I do invite you to check that out. And I do offer a kind of a one-on-one version of it as well, if you really want to just sit down with me, and where you get to verbal process your story, and I pick out the topics and we just brainstorm on them together, and I write you a pitch. You can also check that out over on my website at mai-kee.com. I'll send the link to Tad, and you can check out my VIP Spotlight Day offer as well, where you get to spend that one-on-one time with me, because that's my only one-on-one offer right now. But I really love helping as many people as I can, just to show up and amplify their voice with their consent, because everything that I do is with consent. And to be honest, learning these skills to do it for yourself is what will allow you to show up in spaces that you actually feel safe to show up in, especially if you hold marginalized identities like myself. You may see just from the surface of my skin, you can see that I'm a woman, you can see that I'm of Asian descent, but I do have marginalized identities that you wouldn't know beneath my skin. And maybe, I'm not going to invite anyone to kind of share theirs right now, because that's very intimate, but you might have something that you might feel that okay, I don't just want anyone to see me, because it doesn't actually feel safe for me to show up in certain places. But this is how you can help yourself to choose to have agency over that. So whether it's my Ultimate Podcast Guesting Workshop series that you can do for yourself, or you can work with me directly for my VIP Spotlight Day, or you just want to connect with me on Instagram, all of these options are open to you, but I will leave it to you however you choose, if anything. So thank you for showing up today, and I'm happy to stick around for a little bit for any questions. So I think Nadine had a couple of questions. Please do pop them back into the chat so I can actually look over at it. So Tad, feel free to kind of do this with me. Is there, because I don't want to miss anyone's question before I leave. All right, so we've got Kalita. Yes. Is that how I pronounce your name?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much for all of this. And I'm wondering, is the Spotlight Day the only way to work with you live, not through a recording?
Yes, right now it is. In the UPG workshop series, I do host like live group calls. It's normally like every month or every other month. I actually haven't set a schedule because I've called them Easter egg bonuses, and I kind of show up whenever I just feel called to. But ultimately, yes, right now the VIP Spotlight Day is the only one that I can do one-on-one work with.
But are you open to sharing the prices of these things? Just so people...
Oh yes, of course, yeah. So full transparency, I like that, thank you. So the UPG workshop series, I'm going to type this in the chat as well so you can see it as well as hear it. So the UPG workshop series is $297 USD. I chose pounds, no, dollars. $297, and there is a payment plan as well. You can do 2 payments of $149 as well. And for my VIP Spotlight Day, I have 2 versions of it. So I've got a full day, which is everything. It's the verbal processing and the storytelling, the brainstorming and the pitch writing. All of that is 5.5K. That's for the full day. And for a half day, it's 3.5K. And there are payment plans for that as well. All of that is in US dollars.
And then Kim said, if we have a one sheet or a press kit, as it's often called, is it okay to reformat that to personalize it for each one for the sake of them having a well-organized packet of input?
Sorry, I'm not seeing this question. Did you, oh, right. Oh, it's up. Sorry, can you paste that again? Or
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so if we have a one sheet or press kit, is it okay to format? I won't say that it won't work. I will just, like, if you're personalizing it, that's great. But what I will say is an extra step just to click. So that might be the very thing that kind of hinders a potential yes to potential no. What you can do for yourself is take what you have from the press kit and just pop it into an email form, or because they might have a type form, that they ask you to fill out instead of an actual email. My rule of thumb is if you see on their website, they specifically ask to do the form, do the form. It's literally the pitch deconstructed, right? So I would basically make them do less work as much as I possibly can. And so what I would do instead is just to kind of take what I got from my own press sheet and then personalize it through the email or the form that they've asked.
Yeah, I would agree on that. Another example of this is when people agree to be an affiliate for something. Here's what I want as an affiliate, is them to say, thank you, Tad, so great. Here's the schedule of what's happening. Here's a pre-written email. You've already put like your name in it and your affiliate link. It's all done. Edit as you like. They just give it to me done. And then, hey, the next thing's coming up, and they remind me, but they basically manage me. They tell me what to do, when to do it. And here's the far end of what I don't like. Thanks so much. I got this from one person that just told me. Here's the link to the affiliate website or whatever. So I go in and there's all this. And then not only were there, go for your link here, go for the copy of the images here. It was all over the place. But she named it poetic things. So it was like the river, the hill, the stream. And I had no idea. And I wrote this, and I'm so maxed out, which the best advice I can give you on approaching any hub is you approach them as if they're on the verge of a nervous breakdown, because they are. I'll tell you what, a lot of them are. Approach them with that kind of care, like they're just about to snap. So I was in that place where I was so maxed out, and I said, this is killing me. And she said, I just think I have poetic license. And I said, great, see you later. So yeah, if you can just send it in an email, they don't have to click something, it's just all there. It's I can say on the receiving end of that, thank you so much for understanding how overwhelmed I am and not making me search for things. Yeah. So
yeah, 100%.
Okay,
and we've got another question. How do we balance asking them what they want and sharing what our area of knowledge is and possible topics we can suggest? So, okay, so at the end of the day, it does not serve you to show up on a podcast to talk about something that you actually have no kind of connection to, right? So of course you're going to want to do something from your own expertise. So you need to think, how can you apply yourself to them instead of thinking about how they can apply themselves to you? So that's why we need to do the work to make it easy for them to say yes to us. And so think, okay, what am I willing to talk about? And this, when you research podcasts, which is something that's also covered in my workshop series, you basically need to pick podcasts that would be receptive to your topics. So you can get that from an intuitive feel, or basically what they actually say, the language that they use, the values that they like exhibit through the kind of people that they have on, the conversations they already have. So that's for you, to make sure that is done, like either you do your research or an assistant does it for you, to really pick the podcasts that are ready to hear what you have to say, essentially. So that's how I would actually recommend that you start. Think to yourself, what am I willing to talk about because it actually connects to my business, and making sure that you're only pitching to podcasts that would be receptive to your ideas. So that's what I would say for that.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right, so are there any further questions? I can see a couple of you on camera, so feel free to physically raise your hand because I can see everyone right now. If you've got a question.
One last one. She says, this is a bit vulnerable to ask, but is it enough to only listen to 2 episodes of a podcast for pitching when we may not be able to be regular listeners? And any suggestions for those of us who don't listen to many podcasts for how to search for ideas?
That's a really, really good question, Kim. So thank you for asking that, because I get this asked all the time. Like, oh, do I need to listen to like loads of podcast episodes of theirs to even consider pitching? Because, let's be honest, we're all busy. We all have a certain amount of time that we have to allocate to these things, right? So some people don't listen at all, Kim. So for you to do something, it's good, okay? Like, of course, we can always do more. But if you don't have the bandwidth for it, do something. And if the host really gets that and they can like feel you pick out the references and you've done your research in other ways, then that's great. And for full transparency, for me, when I did that 101 pitch challenge, I didn't listen to every podcast. I wish I did, but I didn't. I didn't have the bandwidth, which is why I don't recommend anyone to do 101 in 30 days, no matter how much help they get, right? Because it needs to feel genuine, this connection. So when you are listening to their podcast, just think of just see what comes up for you. What are the patterns in their interview style, the kind of questions that they ask, and also see how they show up online, not just their website, but what about the day-to-day things on their social media. I often look at someone's social media because it's kind of like an up-to-date sort of thing that they're up to, so I can just see what they value, and if I can meet them where they're out just from that information, then that helps. So thank you for asking that vulnerable question, Kim. I think it's good. It may not be the most you can do, but that's okay. It's still something.
Right, yeah. And then and I would also say it's probably worthwhile, considering which podcasts matter the most to you, which ones do you really, really want to be on? And the more important it is, the more homework I would do. But certainly you could even just look at who have they interviewed before. And, oh, hey, yeah, I see you've interviewed these people. And, those are people I admire. I mean, there's just ways you can show I have paid some attention. This isn't a template thing, which does get awesome.
Yes, absolutely. So, I see a second question in this. Any suggestions for those of us who don't listen to many podcasts for how to search for ideas? So I'll give you one tip when it comes to researching. Look, or what do I call it? Peer at your peers. That's what I call it. So when you look at peers who are showing up on podcasts and your peer is like in a similar industry to you or the same one, an adjacent one, that's 1 degree away for you to potentially connect with this person. I personally do not ask for introductions. I think, and the reason why I do that is because, or rather why I don't ask for introductions, it's because it potentially puts my peer at risk for like a connection that can kind of go flat and it gets a bit awkward for them. I don't want to put them in that awkward position. So instead what I do, I listen to my peer's episode on that podcast I'm potentially interested in. And if I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe I do like this, I reach out to my peer and I congratulate them on the podcast. I share a legitimate takeaway that I've learned from them, and I ask them for advice. Like, hey, I would love to be able to reach out to so-and-so, like insert host name. And I'm curious, like, if you had any advice about, around the process, because advice puts them at little risk. And who doesn't love giving advice? Plenty of people give unsolicited advice. So when you ask for it, they're like, oh, it makes them feel good. It makes them feel like, you know, that they have something worthy to contribute to you. And it's way less risk for them. And it's still something for you to use. You know, it's still something for you to kind of like, okay, they're giving me that advice. Let me try that. And they might offer you an introduction.
Well, this is what I found. I mean, I'm in Victoria right now. First time I ever did workshops in Victoria. My friend Jackie Kaniak gave me 15 people I should reach out to. God bless her. And I reached out to all of them. Subject line was Jackie Kaniak sent me. And but when I reached out to them, my email was basically like, hey, I'm doing this workshop, marketing for hippies. I haven't done one in Victoria before. Jackie said you might have some ideas on places to spread the word. No pressure. I'm sure you're busy, but any help would be really warmly appreciated. And every single person said, I'd be happy to spread the word. I never asked them to spread the word, but all 15 of them spread the word. And there's a few things going on there. One is because I didn't pitch them. It was a very open, like, I'm not blocking the exit. It's just a very brief, courteous, I've got this, I don't know if you could help. And so then they get to step forward and be generous. And also the fact that it was recommended by Jackie, who was fine with using her name like that. It went really well. So yeah, asking for advice, I think that's great. And the other little tip I would give too, if you're looking for podcasts, maybe another iteration of your peers is, yeah, find the peers who are most similar to what you do, and then search their name on Google and see what podcasts they've been interviewed on. You know, and you just find the podcasts themselves. You find
there is a website.
Yeah, here's a list of podcasts I can check out.
Go to listennotes.com, put in a guest name, and it actually shows you the podcast they've been on.
What?
Yes.
Dropping the here. That's amazing.
Yeah, so that should help. And let me just double check. I've got any more questions? Okay, I've got some comments. So Kalita says, I'm sure we'll discover that we don't want to be interviewed on all the podcasts we listen to. Yes, exactly, because you want to get their vibe as well. And actually, on that note, remember that every podcast that you're on, you're essentially advocating for their brand. So don't just say yes to anyone. It may be tempting, because I'm not going to lie, I had some major like ego strokes during that time, but now I'm very, very conscious of who I collaborate with. And actually, Tad will tell you, because I had to check him out first and check out his content. And it's not because I had anything against him personally, but it's because I'm just very mindful of who I collaborate with. And because you'll be promoting each of these episodes, you're promoting them to your audience, and your audience should be able to trust you with whoever's podcast you're on, that you should be able to trust them. It's like a trust transference there. So yeah, don't just say yes to anyone. Don't just pitch to anyone. Like, have some filters in place for what is good for you and who you're willing to advocate for. That's going to be a very, very important thing. So just a note on that. Okay. Yes, copy can be a cover. That's so true. Yeah, so you need to listen, because we all know that when we have a conversation with someone, that there's just something that tells us, even if we can't put our finger on it, we can just tell, like, something feels off here. Listen to that instinct. Yeah. All right. Well, so I think that's all the questions.
Yes. And as we move towards wrapping up, first of all, would you be willing to share the screen again and go back to the Venn diagram you had?
Yes. All right. One sec.
I just want to lift this up for everyone. You know, we're in the middle of this 30-day point of view program, and the Venn diagrams are one of the classic sort of maps that you can use, and this is just textbook goodness here. So we see there's these three elements, right? Purposeful strategy, personalized pitching, and pre-interview prep and post-interview promotion, which to me is one of the most golden things in a golden circle even that I've gotten from Mai-kee. It's like, of course you think about like the lead up to it and what comes after it. And yet it's so easy not to. I mean, what Mai-kee is saying about like start with the offer you want to make first, have that first in mind and reverse engineer from that. That's worth the whole price of admission today, because that changes everything. But anyways, you've got these three Venns. But then you see that she's also got the overlap point. So when you get purposeful strategy plus personalized pitching, you get something that resonates. If you have the personalized pitching with the pre and post prep, this converts. This turns into actual business. Actual clients can come from it. And then with purposeful strategy in the pre-review prep, well, that's your strategy. And then all three together, well, that's the pitch with purpose framework. So this is something to aspire to have something this lucid in your point of view. Because the beauty of this kind of a map is as people are, they hear it, they can, what people are doing all the time with these sorts of maps is figuring out where they are on the map. So they look at it and they say, oh, my strategy is not purposeful. That's the one I'm missing. Or, oh, my pitching hasn't been personalized. Of course, that's it. Or they say, oh man, I haven't done any pre-interview. I've done so many interviews and it's resonated with them and the listeners and me and the host, and there's lots of resonance going on, but I made no money on this. Oh, because I didn't have anything set up. I didn't have the system. I didn't prep and etc. So people can start to see themselves on these maps of what's missing. Or oh, right, I do have a good strategy and I do the prep. Yeah, but it's not person. So people can see what's missing, or they can see, oh, I'm missing two of those. Oh, I'm missing all three of them. Ah, shit. So if people think that they're missing a lot of them, of course, this is implied in this is, well, I could help you with those things. And so if you're missing those things, hey, let me help. So it's just something for all of you to think about in your own mapping things out. This is, of course, Mai-kee could do a whole week-long workshop using those three, just digging deeper into each. Day 1 is on this, day 2 is on this, day 3 is on this.
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And no doubt true for all of us. There's so much we could cover, but the ability to distill it down simply, because otherwise what it is a lot of random information. Okay, so we got podcasts, those are a good thing. Let me talk about why, but actually first let me talk about you got to prep, and it's so scattered. But if you can have a button, everything goes here, here, here. It so helps. Anyways, I just saw that and I saw swoon. That's such a great Venn. I love a good Venn. So
yeah, do you love a good Venn? And that's a great point. Podcasters love frameworks. They like the step-by-step process that you've already done and you've proven, you've validated it. And so it feels safer to teach to their audience when you've got something to take them through. It feels very reassuring that way.
Yes. And I would say this is what the podcasters want, is a unique point of view. If you dial up a podcast and you say, hey, so I'm a health coach. You want to book me? There's nothing compelling about that. But if you say I'm a health coach who has this unique take on health, like I help this group of people with this problem, and I have this twist on it that's contrarian or different than what everyone else is saying, all of a sudden it's like, oh, what? Tell me more. They of course they want something fresh and interesting for their audience. If you say I'm a nutritionist, I'd love to talk about the 4 food groups, why? It's been done. And no one who's got any kind of media-based anything wants to give their people something that's already been done, unless you can show a fresh take on the thing that's already been done. Yeah. Maybe you could say, you know what? Actually, this would be interesting pitches. I'm a health coach, and I actually think we should go back to the 4 food groups, but I think we've misunderstood it the whole time, or something. Oh, what? Going back? Well, that's so hipster and retro. All right, Anyways, there's got to be some fresh take, and it often shows up in a map like this. So I just wanted to flag that. And the other thing I wanted to end on is, I owe you an apology, because in the beginning of this, I mispronounced your name. And I was saying Mai-kee, and I'm sure it happens to you all the time.
It does.
And you deserve better. And I should have had that prepared. I should have known. I think I just thought I knew how. And it's people's names are a big deal. People's names come from somewhere. There's a reason it was chosen. It's a tether all the way to where the people may have come from originally. It's an echo of the place they live in. It's such an immense thing. And so when that kind of care is not taken on somebody's name, it's just it's not proper. I screwed up, and I'm really sorry, and I'll be better about that in the future. And so I just ask your forgiveness for screwing that up.
How can I say no to that? I mean, no, I really, really appreciate that. Whenever my name gets mispronounced, it's a bit like, okay, but that's also the reason why I why I do a short intro at the beginning and I tell the story and I just kind of reintroduce myself again. It's to kind of like save the host from that potential awkwardness. But I do appreciate you bringing it up, especially in front of everybody as well. I think that says a lot about your character. And that's also why when I'm unsure of someone's name, I ask. So Kalita, when you unmute yourself, I was like, is that how I pronounce your name? And like ever since Frozen came out, every Anna that I knew, I'm like, oh, was it Anna? Like that's what I think now. So that's why I never assume. But I do appreciate that very much. Thank you. And there was something I did want to add on to what you said just before that around the fresh take. So if any of you ever feel like, oh, I've got nothing new to add, and plus this host already had someone on there who also had my profession, I want you to listen to that episode and see how you can complement that. Because I pitched someone who had someone already come on about podcast pitching. And I basically had a preliminary interview with a host and I brought so many references from that episode and I wasn't kind of shutting that other person down. I was saying, oh, I also noticed that, they weren't able to cover with the time frame this area of the process. I'm curious if you'd like me to kind of like go all in with that. And because it encourages binge listening for their audience so they can like connect my episode with that previous guest. And that also helps the host feel like, oh, you've actually listened to people in a similar space to you. And that comes across as if like you don't see them as a threat. You see them as someone who can help complement, and so the host is seen as this amazing person who can get multiple views on the same topic. So just a tip there as well. I've got so many tips that just kind of like come as they do.
Yeah, that's cool. That is cool. That's putting yourself in the host's shoes. Because what does the host want? The host wants somebody listens to an episode, then goes listens to another few. So if you're instead of putting the host in the position of, hey, we've got other posts or episodes on this topic, if you say, yeah, you interviewed 3 of my colleagues, this person, and you remember what Dan Blank said, and Mark Silver said this, and then George Cow said this, remember? And you've referenced this, and then you've done it for them. You've directed people to, and so if I were a host, I imagine I just feel so grateful, like, hey, wow, thanks for listening to my stuff, but also, wow, thank you for the shout out. Right, now that podcast with you becomes like a bundle.
Yes. Exactly.
Which you've created you've been the string that gathered up all the wildflowers of their podcast and made a little bouquet for their listener. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, Mai-kee, thank you so much for coming and spending an hour and a half with us. This was extremely generous of you. Is it all right if I share this publicly on YouTube as well?
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I'll share it up and I'll be emailing my list probably next week about it. And and all of you who are here, of course, feel free to share it up, when it comes out with any of your colleagues who need this. So, anyways, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. And
thank you to everyone who stayed till the very end, especially. I think only 2 people had to leave at some point. I just want to quickly check the chat before we go. Just say thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. So appreciate you. And Tad, I'll ping you a quick email. Just to reconnect afterwards. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, Kalita. Bye, everyone.